Hey guys, in this video I'll be showing the entire progress of the motor transplant from the Harbor Breeze Classic style to the Evergo Roma. To give you guys a little bit of background information, the original motor for the Evergo Roma had an open winding, and unfortunately if you have an open winding the motor is pretty much totaled, so you're gonna have to get a new motor in that case. So what I'm doing is I'm going to be transplanting this motor to this fan. I bought this fan from the Habitat Restore last month. First, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off the switch cap and then make a diagram of all the wiring inside the switch housing. Then the next thing I'm going to do is cut this downrod about 1/4, because unfortunately the Evergo's downrod is too small for the downrod holder in this fan, so I'm going to be using this downrod. And since it's very long, I'm going to cut it at about 1/4 and then paint it brass and then paint this black. And then next, what I'm going to do, I'm going to take apart this motor and I'm going to measure out all the spacings on this, and then I'm going to try to drill holes on this motor to make a 4-blade adapter, and I'm going to make sure that they're all evenly spaced out, because if they're not, and if you mess something up, it will go horribly wrong and you will have to start all over with a brand new motor. But wish me luck, and let's get started. Just got the downrod removed. Alright, the diagram has been made. Those are the 3 wires right there. And those are the wires next to the windings inside the motor. All the wiring has been removed. Wires are now cut. Alright, the next thing I'm going to do is remove the switch housing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a screwdriver through there, and I'm going to put another screwdriver through there, then use leverage in order to remove the switch housing, because it's often very tight. So you're gonna want to use leverage. All right, well, the screwdriver didn't work, so instead what I'm gonna do is a socket and ratchet. All right, luckily the socket and ratchet idea worked, and I now have the switch housing removed. Next, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna scrape all this off. All right, got it all scraped off. Next thing I'm going to do is remove the motor housing. The motor housing is removed. The next thing I'm going to do is remove this. Alright guys, I finally got the downrod holder off. It was very difficult. It was Loctited onto there. And there were 2 screws holding it, and they were Loctited also. First, what I did was spray some WD-40 in there, and they were not your average screws. They were kind of like Allen keys, except they had that little hole in the center. I don't really know what kind of screw that's called, but my dad got some of those tools from work, and I tried to use it for those screws. Didn't work though, because they were heavily tight. So what I did was I sprayed more WD-40 in there. And then I put a piece of duct tape over the screws to give it more leverage. Then I tried to unscrew it, that didn't work either. So what I did was I sprayed some more WD-40 in there. And then I used some pliers to get the screws out. It was eventually successful. It was not easy at all, it took a very long time, but I finally got both screws out. And what was even worse was that as I was in the middle of removing the second screw, the head actually came off. So what my dad did was he drilled a hole in there. That way it'd be easier to remove this. And since this was Loctited, what I had to do was I had to stick a pry through those holes and then put some vice grips. Did I do it right here or right here? I forgot. Anyways, what I did was I either put vice grips right here or right here. Then I stuck a pry through there. Used a lot of leverage, and then it eventually came off. Anyways, with that out of the way, what I'm going to do next is pull off the two motor pieces. I'm going to start by removing these screws. Same things with the ones up here. Now that the screws are out of the way, we can finally pull apart the motor. I'm going to be using a gear puller. Now eventually, the gear puller may be a little bit hard to turn by hand after a little bit, so I'm going to be using a socket and ratchet for this job. Alright, got the first half off already. What I'm going to do next is pull the wires out of the shaft. That way I can put the gear puller on here and not damage these wires, and then pull off the second half. I'm going to cut that string and zip tie. That way it'll be easier to pull the wires out. String and zip tie are now cut. Now I'm going to carefully pull the wires out. The wires have been safely removed. Alright, I got the gear puller on the second half. This time, what I did, I put a socket on the vise, then I put the shaft through the socket. I got the piece off. Now unfortunately the bearing didn't come off, so unfortunately we're gonna have to get a new bearing because we're gonna have to pull this out and it's gonna ruin it. What I'm gonna do is spray some WD-40 in there. What I'm actually gonna do, this is the piece where I'm gonna drill the holes, and it's gonna go right there. And this will go up there. Just sprayed some WD-40 on it. I'm gonna let it sit for about 5 minutes, then come back. All right, it's been 5 minutes. Now we're gonna pull it off with the gear puller. All right, I got the bearing removed. Now, unfortunately, I ruined the bearing, so I'm gonna have to get a new bearing. Next thing I'm gonna do is measure out the holes. This is the plate I'm gonna use for the blades. And this was the plate from the Evergo Roma. As you can see, that's where the blades were. What I'm gonna do is push a bearing into there, and then push a rod through the two bearings to act as like a shaft. That way they don't go out of an alignment. And then I need to figure out some way how I'm gonna mark the holes onto the new plate. Got the new bearing pressed in. Keep in mind, this is the old bearing that used to be in there. Next, what I'm gonna do is figure out a way to get a rod pushed through the two bearings to act as like a shaft. What I'm gonna do is put this through there. I ordered this metal bar off of eBay as like a shaft. The open holes in the bearings are about 9/16 of an inch in diameter. So I ordered this metal bar off of eBay, and it's about 9/16 of an inch in diameter. So I'm gonna stick this in there to act as like a shaft. Doesn't wiggle too much, so this should work. Next, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pick any hole on the black plate, and then I'm gonna transfer punch onto the white plate and then I'm going to drill that one hole and then tap it, and then stick a long bolt through the drilled hole on the black plate and through the drilled hole on the white plate. Basically, that would keep the black plate aligned with the white plate for the transfer of the holes. And then I'm going to do the same thing to the hole across from that one to keep it straight as well. I'm going to do that for every single hole, and the key is to take as much time as you possibly can. Do not rush it, because if you do rush it, you will most likely mess up, and you will have to start completely over if you do mess up, because once it's messed up, there's no going back. And also, you're going to want to do the same process for every single hole in a cross-section pattern. Got the punch kit right here. This is the largest one that fits through the hole. What I did was I hammered it in there a little bit so I can make a mark. Next, I had to determine what screw side I needed, so I had to find the original screws for the Evergo's motor, and fortunately enough, I found them. And these are the screws I'm going to use for the new motor as well. Next, what I'm going to do is drill a hole into that mark right there, and then I'm going to tap it with M6 thread size, which is the same thread size as the original screw. At least I think it's an M6. I could be wrong though, but that's what I think it is. And I actually tested it on this piece right here. I did the same thing on this piece just to test it. I punched it with this thing right here. Then I drilled it, then tapped it with the M6 thread, and then put that screw in there, and it fit just fine. And I'm gonna do the same to this piece now. All right, the hole has been drilled and tapped. Here's an important tip. If you want to make sure that the thread size on the screw is the same thread size as the tap, you put both together, and if they interlock, then that means they have the same thread size. Also, you're going to want to make sure that the tap is a bit larger than the drill bit, because first I drilled a hole, and then I tapped it, and then that way the screw can go in there. And how you can tell that this is bigger is that you put these two together. It's a little hard to do this one-handed, but basically if threads are showing on both sides of the drill bit, then that means the drill bit is a bit smaller than the tap, and the screw will fit. Because if the drill bit is bigger than the tap, then the screw is not going to be able to fit, and the hole will be too large. Okay, the next thing I did was put the two motor plates together. And to keep them perfectly straight, I put this rod through to act as a shaft. And to keep both plates secure, I put an M6 bolt through both the plates. That way, once I'm marking out all the other holes, that bolt will keep these two plates secure. And that way, all the new holes will be evenly spaced out. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mark out all the other holes and then drill and tap them. And I'm going to do that in a cross-section pattern. Just did the same thing to the one across. Now I'm going to repeat the process for all the other holes. Okay, so I thought I'd film this just so you guys would get a better understanding of what exactly I'm doing here. So I'm gonna take this and stick it through the hole on the old motor plate, and then you're gonna wanna make sure it's completely straight. You do not want it angled at all. And you're gonna wanna jam it into the new motor plate to make a little hole. And then I'm gonna take that out, and then you're gonna wanna make sure that that hole is dead center to that hole. Next thing I'm gonna do is take this punch right here. You're gonna wanna make sure it goes into the mark. You'll feel it once it's in there. Just double check, make sure it's in there. This is called a spring punch, by the way. And then you're gonna wanna press it in there like that. And then you should make a hole. Next thing I'm gonna do is make a pilot hole with a smaller drill bit. I'm gonna wanna make sure it spins completely straight, it does not wiggle at all. I'm gonna drill into the mark, make sure it's straight. I'm gonna make sure it's straight. Then I'm gonna drill down, and I'm gonna hold this too. Next thing I'm gonna do is extend the hole with a 5.0 millimeter drill bit, which is the proper size for an M6 tap. All right. Okay, now with the hole drilled, I'm gonna tap it with an M6. You're gonna wanna make sure it's straight on there. You're gonna wanna put some weight onto it too. Oops. All right, now the hole is tapped. Next thing I'm gonna do is press this into that hole to get the burrs out. All right, all the holes have been drilled and tapped on this motor plate. Next thing I'm gonna do is paint both motor plates black. Before I do that though, I'm gonna make sure all the blades fit on there correctly. In this case, they do. All right, both motor plates have been spray painted. Next thing I'm gonna do is press a new bearing onto this plate. All right, the new bearing is pressed in. Next thing I'm gonna do is push those wires through that hole right there. All right, the wires have been pushed down. Next thing I'm gonna do is secure them with a zip tie. All right, the zip tie is on there. Next thing I'm gonna do is press the plates on there. I'm gonna press this plate onto the top and this plate onto the bottom. And then after that, I'm gonna screw them together. All right, I got one side of the motor on already. In case you're wondering how I did it, I placed down 2 vertical 2x4s. Then I placed the flat side of the motor onto the 2x4s. And then I sprayed some 3-in-1 oil onto the shaft area around like right here. And then I sprayed some around the inside of the bearing as well, around here. and then I just pressed it on there. Motor is back together. Next thing I'm gonna do is screw the downrod piece on there and then secure it with the screws. All right, I just got the downrod piece installed. I installed the Allen keys in there too. Next thing I'm gonna do is insert these 3 wires through the shaft. Just got the wires through. Next thing I'm gonna do is install the motor housing. Got the motor housing installed. Next thing I'm gonna do is install the downrod and canopy. Got the downrod and canopy installed. Next thing I'm gonna do is install the switch housing. Got the switch housing installed. Next thing I'm gonna do is rewire everything. This came from the Harbor Breeze Classic style, which is what this motor was originally on. I don't really feel like spray painting this, so I'm just gonna use a Sharpie to paint this. I'm gonna find 2 other screws that are brass or silver. Everything has been rewired. Next thing I'm gonna do is install the switch cap and test it out. All right, the switch cap has been installed. Let's see how it runs. All right, sweet. There's high, medium, low, and off. All right, she works. Success. And that is how I restored my Evergo Roma that had a seized up motor. For those of you who have a vintage ceiling fan with a seized up motor, what you could do is, instead of spending a lot of time trying to find an identical motor, what you could do is find a modern ceiling fan motor and just do everything that I did. I hope this video is inspirational and encourages y'all to do the same with vintage ceiling fan motors that got seized up. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video.